Welcome back to Refactoring Paleo, where we take a 20-year-old Mac app and modernize it. My name is Tom. If you've been following along for quite a while, we've been trying to move all the code that uses SQLite into a very narrow window of places in the app, because most of the app shouldn't know how we're actually storing the data. And I think we got to a place last time where we've gotten there. All the main code that needs to talk to SQLite is now kind of hidden behind a wall. But to get there, we probably ended up leaving a lot of bits and pieces in place that we want to clean up. And while we're at it, let's take the opportunity to clean up a few other warnings that we can do on the cheap. There'll be a lot of warnings that we're not going to touch simply because we're not ready to touch them or whatever, but we can start tackling a lot of them. The more we get rid of, the easier it will be to continue our migration to a modern app. So why don't we jump in? Okay, here we are, Xcode in our project, Paleo. The very first thing we can do is start looking at our list of warnings. We don't have any errors right now, but we do have a warning. And the very first one we see is very suspicious. It said build SQL is deprecated. So let's investigate. So what does this method do? Called in from a couple of places, but what it does is build a SQL command. And it just returns a string. That's fine. But we have all this other stuff down here too. As a matter of fact, this is where we just checked our warning. So what's up with this? So this read SQL has a few callers. This one has a few callers, but we shouldn't really have these. What about this one? That one has a caller, but does this have a caller? No, it doesn't. So let's do something here. Let's create a split window. On the right, we're going to have our .m file. On the left, we're going to have our .h for our file, which is XR dataset. So we have our header on the left and our implementation on the right. Nobody's calling this one, so let's just take care of it. So it's init from SQL. There it is. Let's get rid of it. And let's get rid of this. Okay, let's check where else we might have some SQL. Let's see if that's still being used. No, we can get rid of that. That may be private, so it may not have, doesn't exist in the header, so let's get rid of that. Let's double check read SQL. Oh, that's another initializer. Let's see if we call that ever. No, we don't. Let's check to see if it's in the header. It is. Which one is this one? That's the first one. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. That uses SQLite. Are we calling this one? No. Let's get rid of that. Init with table. There it is over there. Init with data should be fine, but let's just double check it. It is being used. All right. What else might we have here? Let's go ahead and get rid of the import SQLite from the header. See what happens. No complaining. Even though it's there. See if this is still there. It's not used anymore. Get rid of that. What about build SQL? Get rid of that. Seem to have gotten rid of all of this, but we do have one little hanging guy there. Nobody's using that. So let's go ahead and get rid of that whole section. And let's go ahead and try to get rid of SQLite at the top of here. Let's build and see what happens. Build succeeded just fine. Let's run tests. Test pass. That's actually a bad thing because all that should have been tested. But as I mentioned, this app wasn't originally tested. We want to add tests as we go. But we have a lot of code that just isn't tested in any way, shape, or form. I'm curious. I want to see if these things are actually being used. That's not being used anywhere. Let's get rid of that. That's still being used. Now I'm going to probably get rid of this type. It's basically a holder type for a statistic, but there's a lot of reasons why I don't think I need that anymore, but we'll talk about that in a future episode. So let's check over here. Did we ever use that? Yes, we still have it. We'll eventually get rid of all these notifications, but right now we're not going to touch it. That's too much. So I'm going to quickly go and commit this, and then I'll come back. Okay, here we are back in Xrow's document. You can see we have a bunch of warnings here. Let's take a look to see if we can do anything about it. Starting here, we have a deprecation warning. So we are creating the document model and we're creating an in-memory store, a lock and net. Now, if I remember correctly, this is going to have to stay because this is one of the problems that we might have with transitioning from Objective or connecting with Objective-C to Swift. That code will change once we make this a Swift file. So we're kind of stuck with that. So let's take a look at this. One of the things we've done earlier is we moved the geometry control into the document model, I believe. So as you can see over here, we have this use save geometry instead. So let's see if we can replace that real quick. All right, so that was a quick fix. This is actually being handled inside the document model, and it's very simple. So the actual code here will actually throw if there's an error, but when it's translated to Objective-C, it returns an error. So we'll probably need to improve this in the future. Let's see what's next. So we have awake from nib, and if self did load, we load datasets from database. Let's take a look at this method real quick. Load datasets from DB never actually uses the data sets. So let's just rename this and go back to where we were and just call it load datasets. This might actually be in the interface. We'll see. Nope, no warnings on that. So that was an easy fix. So configure with geometry controller now has been replaced. Or has it? So apparently this now happens automatically. We don't even have to call it. So let's get rid of it. Okay, this one's a little bit interesting. We have this create DB call in here. So we're configuring the document. Let's go over what it does. Configure the document. We create an error. We say, hey, if the document model has a memory store, which is what's deprecated, and it is not null, we can do this. But if it is null, we do that. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the current state because we don't want to get a memory store. What can we do different? Well, on the right, let's take a look at the document model. And we can see that we have a window size. The window size is by default 0. So if we never set the window size, it's going to be by default 0. So let's check for that instead. So we'll do self-document model, window size. There is a, I'm trying to remember what the default is. It's actually a CG size. There we go. Make sure that looks correct. And then have an else. So this now goes up here because, oh, that doesn't make sense. Well, let's see if NS SQL sizes works. Okay. Okay, there we go. And this code would all go in here. So anyway, what goes on here is that if this is the default value, we call create database. Otherwise, we get the frame of the window, get the window size from the document model, set the frame size, and make sure that it's still non-zero. And if it's non-zero, let's update the window. Now this one, I believe, down here. So this happens automatically, so we don't need this method anymore. And then we have this error message thing. But as it turns out, we never have an error in here, so it doesn't even make sense to have this. So we simplified this a lot already. That brings up this method. If we look in here, it's doing something similar. It's finding the window controller, make sure it has more than one, or more than zero, excuse me. Gets the window size. If there's an error, does this. This again is no longer valid. So it looks very similar to what we have. As a matter of fact, why don't we just move it? Just get rid of that altogether. Bring it back, and now don't need that because we already have it. So now we have two error calls because we didn't have that first one. This one can have an error, so we do want to log it at the very least. We could simplify this more, but we're probably going to get rid of it eventually, or treat it a little bit differently. For example, we have a lot of repeated code, like this call is happening in both cases. And then we only have the error there. And that brings up the point that eventually we're going to have a working system for errors to show the user. A way to display the errors to the user and display and log errors in a way that we can use them for debugging purposes, instead of just having it logging out to the console line. But I have a suspicion we'll have an error. Got a build error right away. And this was just setting the view, so I don't even think this needs to be there. So it was there for a reason before, but now it's. So we can see that we fixed everything in the rows document. We have an emitter that still has an issue. The zib has some issues, but you know what? That's going to be a future episode where we get rid of the zib altogether if we can, and replace it either with programmatic views that are either UIKit or SwiftUI. Haven't decided. Now we have other issues, but before we go to those other issues, why don't I go ahead and take another short break and commit. Okay, so while we're at it, let's fix some of these other warnings that we can look at. These I'm just going to delete. This just says which ones are allowed. These two don't exist anymore. Let's just get rid of them. Be done with that. This has been deprecated, but I'm not going to touch it for now. But we have a bunch of these floating around in these warnings. So let's look at the right answer for this. So that's SP set allowed content types. Pass an array. And in this case, we just want to pass a plain text file. Plain text. Nope, that's not what I want. There we go. So now we fixed that finally. And let's see if we can file the rest of them while we're at this, so we don't have a problem in the future. I think that gets rid of all that type problems. So I'm going to make another commit after I go ahead and build and test. We'll commit that, and I'll come back. So let's take a look at some of these other warnings that I potential length violation. This is kind of weird because this code doesn't work just yet. Maybe we'll fix that in the future. This one's a little bit weird too because I am doing a force unwrap on that because I need a font there. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is okay. Okay with that. These legacy Objective-C things we'll fix in later updates. And these things are a little bit weird. I'm not sure why they're being documented, but they're going to have to be fixed at some point in the future. But they're not going to be fixed right now. So let's go ahead and do another build. We have a couple things. This left. This one right here is not fixable today. But the question is, can we fix this one? This one's kind of a interesting problem because this is the way we used to open files in the past. Use the NS workspace, shared workspace, open the file with application. That's been deprecated in favor of another solution. But let's do something a little bit. Let's actually ask the AI to fix this one for us. Let's see what it comes up. Now, I can use AI extensively. I'm not using it here that much, mainly because I'm trying to show you how to do something rather than just having the AI do it. But occasionally, I'm okay with it because sometimes it just takes more time to figure out than just letting the AI do it for you. And that's also to say sometimes I use AI in prep work for this, just to take a look. And we're going to use AI again in a few minutes after we solve this issue. But one of the things about this particular case we want to think about is, do we want to even have this kind of thing at all, or should we allow the user to open it some other way with some other tool instead of text edit by default? And I think we do save it. You know what? The more I think about it, maybe we should just delete. We save the file, but we don't need open. That's kind of forcing the user to open a file they may not. So let's go ahead and just get rid of it. I'm feeling better about that solution. Deleting code sometimes just feels better than writing it or just rewriting it to keep it. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and commit, but what I'm going to do is that I am keenly aware that since we did all this rejiggering and stuff, we probably have a lot of code that still is hanging around that should. And I'm just going to touch one place for that, and that's going to be the document model. The document model does a lot of stuff, and we had to create a lot of interfaces in the document model so that all the old ways would still work with it. But now we don't need them so much. So let's go back to the AI. Let's start a new chat. And we're going to use Claude in this case. And what I'm going to tell it to do is I want it to look for unused code in the document model. I could say a bigger span, but let's stick to the document model. So while it's doing that, let's actually go to the document model. So we can see that we have a lot of things that are marked deprecated. Why are they deprecated? Well, they were deprecated from their beginnings because those were interfaces that were built specifically to handle the old way of doing things and are there waiting to removed. The question is, can we remove them? I can go through each and every one to see if they're called. But this is one of those instances that a very simple command prompt can really help you with. And to be honest, we could have done all of this work with a prompt. But again, we want to actually learn something. Okay, so we have some suggestions that the code, for what code may not be used. So let's look at first thing, 36. That doesn't seem to be used. Do we ever use this anywhere? Doesn't look like it. I'm going to hold on to this in the meantime, but I'm going to go on to more important things. What about this rename table? 6. This guy, if you remember, we had a menu item where you could actually change the shape and name of tables. And we took it out. And that would call into this. Know that it's marked as deprecated. We're not using it anymore, so let's just dump it. If we need to, we can. The in-memory store can hold on to that feature, but we don't really need it. 115 to 117. Just come down here, this add, which adds a column name, a new column to a table. I don't think we want to do that anymore. That can go away. Store geometry controller 143, which is probably a little bit less. Target geometry controller. I don't believe that's being called. Get rid of it. Configure geometry controller, this guy. Get called. Nope. Get rid of it. Store layers, deprecated. Trash it. That's being used. That's being used. Now it's saying that we can drop to Objective-C in both of these two cases. Let's just build and make sure we can work on before we do that. Okay, it built fine. Let's go ahead and see if we can get rid of these Objective-C flags. So that's another thing we want to watch for is whenever we can get rid of the Objective-C flags, we want to get rid of them. If we don't need them, we don't need them. It makes things a little bit more complicated than we need. So there's other places we can look at, like in the in-memory store itself. There's things we're not going to call, but we might change our minds in the future. This interface we want cleaner. In-memory store can be a little bit messier in terms of what's in there, but we want to make this interface as clean as possible. So at this point, I think we're at a good stopping point for this episode because we're getting to a point now where we can start delving into other types and really starting to refactor them, make them cleaner, make them swift, and move on. So I'm excited. Hopefully you guys are ready to go with some totally different directions in work. And this is all our prerequisite. So I'm going to commit this, run few more tests, and then I'll get this posted. So I'll see you next time. My name is Tom. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more. Have a good one.